Well, thank you for joining. This is going to be a fun one today where I'm talking about rules and specifically rules that guide me that I've kind of put together over the years. One thing that I realized is that I need rules in my life as somebody who very much never listened to rules growing up. I realized when I was older that I actually crave them and that they help me a lot. And the reason for that, I think, as I'm still trying to put together my thoughts on why around this, is that the rules that I've set myself make me feel safe and also just help help me make better decisions and help me get out of what I call the stupid gear of my brain when it seems to take over. I find that we kind of second guess ourselves a lot. I certainly do. And we start to excuse ourselves or give the reasons why we should act in a certain way. Like if I want to say something nice to somebody, I start making up all of these reasons why I shouldn't say that nice thing to that person for no reason whatsoever. And having these rules in the back of my head kind of helps with that. But what I think it really comes down to is, we're all searching for freedom, whatever that word means. That word doesn't really mean anything unless you give it meaning. And to me, freedom is really about control. It's really about being in control of our day to day. And in order for that to happen, I think that we need to build in structure. So there was so from that structure comes the rules, right? And what I want to do today is I want to share with you a whole bunch of these rules. Like, I don't know if we'll get through all of mine, but I mean, I'm at 21, I think, on my list here. I've never really counted them. 22. Um, Probably won't get through all of them, but go through as many as I can and kind of explain a little bit of the background of them and why we set them and what they do for me. And I'd love to hear it if you have any as well, even if you haven't defined them as rules, kind of call it heuristics or rules of thumb that you guys live by. I would love, love, love for you to share them. So I think the best way to do that is as I'm talking, if you even think of anything that you do that could be related or unrelated to what I'm talking about that fits into this theme, just maybe pop into the chat, be like, I've got something. And then I'll call on you kind of whenever there's a natural break. I guess the only other piece before I just dive straight into it is, like I said, growing up, I always hated when rules were imposed upon me. And so it's weird now that I'm coming out and saying I think that they're really important. And it comes down to this study. It's a really famous study. You might have heard me speak about it before. I've spoken about it a lot, but it's a pretty famous study, and it's called I Don't versus I Can't. The basic premise, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but they took 100 people and they asked them to repeat a phrase that said, I don't eat candy or I can't eat candy. And then they let them go and said, bye-bye, thanks so much for whatever, participating in our study. And in the hallway actually is where the study took place. And in the hallway, somebody offered them a candy bar. And what they found was about 50% more people that were in the I can't take candy took the candy. And the reason for that is I don't is a choice that you make. I can't is a choice imposed upon you. And so the importance here of self-directing your choices in terms of your own free will, I think is really, really important to keep in mind, both for us, but also for our clients. So, I don't know, let me just dive into these. Like I said, if you have any kind of rules of thumb or anything that you live by, I'd love to hear them too. Just pop into the chat, say I've got something, and I'll call on you. The first one is, I like to start with the first one because it's just so simple and so silly and so small, but it's something that I think we can all associate with, especially those of us who live in New York City, Dan, which is if the light is red, even if there's no cars coming, just stop and wait until it turns green. It just seems like it seems like that's just the simplest way for me to take a natural pause over the course of the day and just kind of look around or take a couple breaths or something like that. There's not much more to say about this rule other than trying to find time and space to just pause throughout our day and not feel like we need to rush through it. Just because the light is red and there's no cars, you don't need to cross the street. I was in New York City last week, and I mean, the only time when I didn't follow this rule was when I was in Times Square, and I probably would have been tackled if I stopped at the red light if there were no cars coming. Gus, tell me about this. I don't use bags with wheels ever. What do you mean by that?
I just refuse to use the wheels with bags when I travel because I see everybody sort of in the airport, and I just see. I think it's like a metaphor for unless you use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And I'm not be capable of carrying my bags, however big or however small they are, wherever I go. And I kind of think about the kind of like I'll get this wrong, but the sort of like the Milo's kind of fable about like he carried a calf.
Yeah.
Grew up, and I'm like, I always want to be that person, and I'm pretty convinced I will be, regardless of age, that we'll be able to carry the calf on my bags. My bag is the calf, and I kind of think that's a metaphor for the rest of my life. And a lot of my friends, a lot of my family think I'm crazy for this, but I think they're crazy for not doing it because I watch those people. I'm 44, and I watch people get less and less capable and less confident and more rely upon like those comforts, and doesn't sit well with me.
The capability aspect's an interesting one. I've never thought about it that way. I never thought about it that way. I like it, do the harder thing. Yeah, Angela, always take the stairs when they're offered, 100%. It's just an excuse to just fit in a little bit more movement, right? The capability thing is useful. What I like about what you said, Gus, and I mean, I'm saying this as somebody who does use wheels on bags, namely because when I travel and I've got two kids with me, I'm generally going to end up carrying at least one, if not both of the kids. And so, one kid on my shoulder, the other one in one arm, like I'm going to drag that bag. But I like that. What I like most about this is it seems like a very useful constraint. So my wife and I traveled for basically 6 years together every winter for like 4 or 5 months, and we never checked a bag, right? We had backpacks. We never checked a bag. And then when we had kids, we started checking bags wherever we went. So we still did the same travel. We dragged them with us, but we started checking a suitcase, then 2 suitcases. And last year, the night before we were going to leave for 4 months in Nicaragua and Mexico, we went to check in on the plane, and we got a notice that said, you can't pay for extra bags. I've never seen this notice before in my life. It just said the plane is full. You can't check bags. And it's because we didn't prepay for them. I always just pay for them when I check in. So it said we couldn't. So at about 7 p.m. the night before we were about to leave for 4 months, we had to repack 3 suitcases into backpacks and to carry on. There was no other option. And what we found was that we actually don't need the suitcases. We never needed them. And so we'll never check a bag again, even with a family. We fit everything into backpacks, and it was perfectly fine. And so what I like about what you said there, Gus, is I like the capability for sure. But I also like that as a useful constraint. If you can't carry it, you don't bring it. I like that a lot. Shane, what do you got for me, man? Are you there? Oh, Shane popped off. He's probably getting coffee because it's like 4 a.m. Okay, I'll go into the next one. My next rule, Shane, I'm going to call on you after. My next rule is, this came down when I was a personal trainer, because I always had those little 5 or 10 minute breaks where somebody was late or whatever it was. And I'd sit there and I'd pop on my phone or whatever. And so I got really frustrated by this. And I was like, okay, I'm just always going to have a book on me. And I'm going to get really, really good at reading a page at a time and not get frustrated when I don't have more time to read. This works better with fiction than nonfiction. But that's a rule that I brought with me now, again, with kids. Anybody who has kids here, throw up your hand. So you will all know something that I figured out the hard way, which is oftentimes you never know whether you have 5 minutes or an hour and a half. If the kid is napping, if the kid is doing something, you just never know how much time you're going to have. And that can be really, really awkward. And that was really, really difficult with me. So I was like, oh, well, this is the same thing as when I was a personal trainer. I never knew whether I had 5 minutes or 30 minutes because I didn't know how late Tom was going to be. And why don't I just do the same thing? So wherever we go now, I just throw my Kindle or throw the book that I'm reading. And I often won't read it. Or sometimes I'll just like pop it open and read a page or two at a time. But this idea, this rule of bring a book and reprogram myself so that I reach for my book and not my phone in all of those little in-between moments. Man, if nothing else, it just gets my brain working better. I find the minute that I start reaching for my phone, there's just so much input. Maybe other people can deal with this better than I can. There's just so much input that I start getting brain fog. I start getting negative. I start getting exhausted. I just don't think it's necessary. There was a line, I think this came from Ryan Holiday when I had the opportunity to do like a really intimate thing with him a little while back. One of the things he said that's always stuck with me is that it's not a fire unless you know about it. It's not a fire unless you know about it. He said, I used to check my email all the time, or I check all this, I check my alerts all of the time. And if something happened, or if somebody said something on the internet that I needed to argue with, or I got an email saying that something had gone wrong or gone right or whatever it was a fire. I had to deal with it right away. And then I realized that it's not a fire if I don't know about it. And so he just stopped checking in those in-between times, because he found that in those in-between times he'd check, and then it wasn't an in-between time and his kid wanted him, but he'd still be like deep in the whatever, arguing with somebody on the internet that he had to be doing. So I always liked that one. Shane, do you mind sharing? Good morning, my friend.
Hey, mate, I'm just curious, if you don't look at your phone all the time, how do you keep up with everyone's Instagram posts? Because obviously that's the most important thing in the world.
Yeah. I don't. I've even accepted the fact that I'm going to be much less engaged on my own Instagram, and that's not a business decision. That's just a life decision. It's not a good thing. It's not a like, yeah. It's just, you can't do it all.
I give myself 1 day a week. But obviously I use it for work. So anyway, but I'm assuming you know the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So that was one of the things. Far out, man. I read that book in 2003, probably, and there's so many things of that book that still stand out in my memory, and this was one of them. Just try and be a nice human being and find things that are nice about people, or something that I like about someone, and tell them. And it's just a good habit to be in. However, I have found that if I do it too much, sometimes I get in trouble because people think I'm hitting on them when I'm just trying to be nice.
Right.
But then I recently heard this line only a few weeks ago, which was, everyone has a little piece of God in them, and that's who you're talking to. I really like that one. It's actually helped, funnily enough, on sales calls, because I try to remind myself of that every time, because my goal isn't to sell someone to be a client. My goal is to just genuinely find the real person and speak to them. So that's kind of one sort of practical thing where it's helped, but I'm trying to remind myself of that all the time with everyone that I speak to. We've all got busy lives and this, that, and the other. And so rather than judging people on how they're feeling, acting, or whatever at the time, it's changed to a degree,
Right.
my interactions with people, a lot, actually, even just recently. So it's been cool.
So I've got one kind of similar to that, that I'll get to a little bit later on. It's my rule number 9 in no particular order. So we will revisit that a little bit. Michael, actually, your rule that you put here with the lockbox was very similar to my next one. So Michael said, I've got a rule that I put my phone in a lockbox during family time. There were these like lockboxes that were designed, actually, they were designed initially for dieting, where they have a timer on them. And they were sold to people who are trying to diet. And the idea was you put your snack foods, because the issue, again, particularly for people who have kids, like yo, you know how many Cheez-Its and like goldfish I eat at 9 o'clock at night? Because when they're in the house, Cheez-Its are the best food ever before you go to bed. The problem, of course, is those things are designed to be very, very addictive. And so there were these lock boxes that were designed to have a timer on them and not open until the next morning. And then people have iterated them to phones, which is probably the only thing more addictive than Cheez-Its. And so people use these lock boxes for timers and stuff. We don't have any of them, but what I do is, and this is the preface to all of this is what happens in my household when things are going well. This isn't what always happens in my household. And the good thing about these rules is that when things are not going well, I can always look back at these and I've broken one of them and I know exactly how to fix it, which is a really, really useful tool. So we have our chargers for our phones are right at the entrance. We come into our house usually through the garage. We don't really ever use the front door because we've got a door into the garage. And so we have the chargers for our phones actually by the door of the garage. And the idea is the phones don't enter the house. The phones don't enter the house. We have a chair that's a comfortable chair by the garage door. And if we want to use our phone, it's absolutely fine. But we use it in that chair. And we don't bring our phones into the house. So if we need to make a phone call, or if we need to find something out on whatever, need to do, like I need to do something on social media or that type of thing, we have it at the entrance, which is similar, Michael, to yours. But that has made a big difference for all of us, for sure, because it's so easy to just reach for it if it's always kind of with you. My rule number 4, you've probably heard me talk about this one, is looking at email not as a task, but as a place where tasks accumulate. So it's kind of nuanced. But my problem that I always used to have is I always used to click on email and I think that I'd need to deal with my emails in order of when they'd come in, top to bottom. And what I found was happening there is I'd have to task switch all the time. There's a researcher, her name is Dr. Gloria Mark. I did an interview with her on the Obvious Choice podcast. If you go back, you can get more detail, but she leads the informatics department at the University of California, Irvine. And her area of study is attention span in a tech forward world. Basically, how do we control our focus? One of the things she talks about is there's something like a 23-minute gap between pulling up one mental schema for a task versus another mental schema, which means that anytime you switch on to something else, it takes you 23 minutes to actually pull up your almost mental blueprint for that new task, in addition to it just being really, really energetically taxing. And so the problem when you go into email and you have, let's say, 5 different emails on 5 different topics, is you actually have to pull up 5 different mental schemas. You have to think about 5 different things for each one that you want to deal with. And it's exhausting. It wears you down. And so I started to look at email as a place where tasks accumulate. And so I actually have a task where I go into my email and I file them. I don't answer them. I file them. And I file them based off of the categories. So it might be like program design. It might be, call it administration, bookkeeping, like invoices, like whatever the main categories you have, each one's got a folder in my email. And in some cases, I can actually automate it using Gmail's filters to go in the folder. In most cases, I can't. But I just go in and I just mark them as a label and get them out of my inbox. And then in my calendar, I have a task where I deal with all similar types of emails at once. And so instead of saying I'm working on my email, it's like, oh, I'm answering questions about programs, or, oh, I'm paying my invoices. And everybody who invoices me knows that I pay the last business day of the month. So I just go in there and deal with them. That way I'm not switching back and forth all of the time. Now, again, with all these rules, like it's not the specific rule itself necessarily that you need to adopt. I'm not saying that. And that's why I'm trying to explain kind of the reasoning behind them, like why I do these things. It's just the idea of like, can you figure out a way where you can go into your email and have already set for you one type of action that you need to take, one type of task that you need to tackle at any given time, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to try to do all these things at once. It's a small thing, but I found that these small little things make my day-to-day so much better, because at the end of the day, I'm just less worn out. Like, I feel more energized at the end of the day. The next one is kind of similar. It's called Touch It Once, which is you never open up anything and then decide you don't want to deal with it and then put it on unread and then deal with it later. Deal with it at the moment. Again, not perfect, but dealing with it might be filing it, right? In kind, but same type of thing. Yeah, not to argue on social media. That's a good rule, Michael. It's so interesting, the idea of arguing on social media. My rule is I don't talk about politics and religion on social media. And the reason for that is I think it either needs to be a part of your platform or not a part of your platform. And I think that it can't be anything in between. Like, you either need to plant your flag in the ground and be like, this is what I stand for. If you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, you're against me. And that's a really effective marketing tool. Like, I saw some guys that were, wherever you stand, they were very opinionated during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some on one side, some on the other side. It didn't really matter which side they were on. The point is that they were just very opinionated on their side. And their businesses grew very quickly during that time, because they were willing to rile people up and get people angry. And when that happens, of course, a lot more attention falls on them, and the people who agree with them felt closer to them. I decided that it wasn't something I felt strongly enough, and decided not to build my platform on it. I mean, but when it comes to politics or religion, I mean, my opinion is it's either a part of what you do or it's not a part of what you do. And if it is a part of what you do, you have to understand the trade-offs of that. And, you know, there's a lot going on in the world at any one time, where it can be annoying, edging on dangerous to have it as part of the world, and you might accept that.
This rule, I actually made it up in 2014 at the height of the bodybuilding.com forums.
Oh God.
And
okay.
So who had the most research to back up whatever, and I spent a whole day of my vacation with a girlfriend at the time, basically, you know, trying to give her attention and then going back to my phone, and she kept asking me, she was like, are you on your phone?
Yeah.
And she just felt really neglected, and so that's when I made that rule. And that's kind of, if someone disagrees with me on a post, I'll say, hey, that's your opinion, and this is, or I'll just clarify whatever I have to say. But I can't go down any kind of huge argument. Just, I think for me, it just would be a waste of time. Taking from client fulfillment, whatever I have to do, family or whatever.
One of my favorite quotes at all time is Keanu Reeves said something like, you could look up the exact quote, but he said something like, he's like, I'm at the point in my life where I just don't argue with people anymore. If you come to me and you say 2 + 2 = 5, I'll say that's wonderful and good for you. It's just like, okay. This next one is one of my favorite rules, which is keep the special things special. There is so much magic in this world. This is like high and mighty philosophical John for you. Just bear with me for a second. There is so much magic in this world. I watched the hockey game last night at a bar. man, the camera work, the fact that we have television, the fact that everybody can get together and I can have microbrewery beer or this type of beer or non-alcoholic beer or whatever I want, like the internet, there is just so much eating out in restaurants. There's just so much magic in this world that has become so commonplace that it's so easy to take it for granted. And Allison and I, many, many years ago said, you know, let's just make an effort to keep the special things special, which means that we don't eat out often at restaurants. But when we do, we eat out. We go to a nice place. We order appetizers. We order desserts. Like, we do it up and we're there with each other. We don't own a TV. We don't have a TV in our house. And it's not like I hate TV. I think TV is incredible. I freaking love TV. But the problem was, I know that if I had it in my house, I would take it for granted and I wouldn't love it as much. So I'm like that jerky guy who's at a friend's house and like, oh my God, this is amazing. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the colors. The colors. Wait, you get all these channels? You mean I can watch anything I want right now? Ever? That's ever been produced? And they laugh at me because it's like an idiotic thing, but it's this technology. And so what I try to do is almost hold back consuming all of these, call it particularly wonderful technologies, but like try to hold myself back with all these things as much as possible so that when I do consume them, I can really appreciate just how unbelievably special they are. Eating out is definitely one of them. Moving on. Celebrating process wins, even if there's no result. Okay. With an experience that you share with a loved one. So we get this advice all of the time, and we probably give this advice to clients all the time too, which is the outcome is not always in your control, or maybe the outcome is far away, or maybe it's hard to measure. And so appreciate the process, fall in love with the process, right? How many of you have heard that advice and like buy into that advice? Like it's good advice. The question that I started to get with it is, cool, how the hell do I do that? Like, what does that mean? It's a really nice thing to say. It's a really nice thing to put out a post about on social media or write a book about. But then you get into the day-to-day and you're like, okay, I'm not enjoying the process. Because the process kind of is always going to be hard. And so what I started to do is whenever I have a big project that I'm tackling, for me, it's generally book writing, but whenever I have a big project that I'm tackling, I'll identify a few major points in the process that I think deserve being celebrated. And what I'll do is I'll book an experience with somebody that I love right for when that's over. Because one of the things that I also recognized is that people who we love and that love us often celebrate outcomes, not processes with us. Whereas they should celebrate the processes. But naturally, we celebrate outcomes because outcomes you can measure, outcomes you can see, processes we can't. So people who want to be in our corner don't really know how to often. And so tangible, here's how I did it for the previous book. So when my first draft of the manuscript was due, the day after, I booked a trip with my entire family, my mother-in-law, to Ometepe in Nicaragua. So we went off for 4 days and celebrated. The second draft, when I submitted it, the day after, I left for Oaxaca City for a trip with my dad. And then the final manuscript submission, Allison and I took off for 2 nights away, just us. For my next book, the option proposal, the day after I submitted the option proposal, I took Calvin to Legoland in Florida. And so every time that I'm doing this, all that I'm trying to do, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It might just be like a dinner. It might just be like a date night. It might be a paddle on the water here in Toronto. But figuring out a way to stamp a process win with somebody you love and celebrate with them, I found has helped kind of pull me through to get to the end, when the goal or when the thing at the end of the journey is just so big and so far away that it can't possibly be motivating to keep me going. Gus, tell me about this one, man.
Well, you know, obviously with clients especially, you get a lot of people that don't seem to appreciate the work you put in, or even friends and family. Like I've got, my brother's he's schizophrenic, and sometimes his behavior is quite erratic and quite challenging for people. But you know, him and people who struggle with mental health issues, you know, they haven't got full control, and they certainly don't have full control of the actions. They're often regretful, and often we treat people in the face of things, and we just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know how lucky we are. So I try to remember that as best I can when people are shitty to me. It's not always possible, but I do try to do that.
So, David, I'm going to get to you in a second, but Gus, what you just said leads really nicely into my next rule. So thank you for that, which is default to trust. This came about over the course of all of the travel that I've done, where you just never know if you're in a foreign country, whether the cabbie is going to rip you off, whether you're going to be taken advantage of. And I'm sure that I've been taken advantage of a lot of times. But you know, I kind of decided one day that I'm just not going to negotiate. I'm not going to argue. I'm not even going to put a single thought into whether I'm being mistreated, because I recognize that the vast majority of time I'm not, and also the vast majority of time in almost every case, the person that I'm dealing with is a genuinely good person. Even if they're mistreating me, they're probably doing it for reasons that I don't understand to support somebody. It's like the old philosophical question of, if somebody steals a loaf to feed their starving family, is it a crime? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think there's a good answer to that. But there have been some really fascinating interviews with, you know, kind of like the stereotypical Nigerian scammer. Like there have been New York Times interviews with these people, and they're like, I know what I'm doing isn't a nice thing to do, but it's the only way that I can feed my family. And so I have to do it. I don't feel good about it, but I have to do it. It's not like they're bad people. And so this idea of defaulting to trust has just given me this leeway to just say, you know what? I would rather walk around, yeah, Shane, consciously choose to live in a slightly naive world. I'd rather walk around naive to the world that I live in. And
Absolutely, man. It makes life so much more fun and positive and everything. I'm not a complete idiot, obviously, but yeah, people get more of the benefit of the doubt than they probably should, but like it makes life better. So what else is the point of life?
And it's easier, and there's only so many things to pay attention to. And how much can you possibly stress about and let bother you? Right. David, what do you got, man?
So my rule is safety third.
Say that again. Safety third.
Safety third.
Okay, tell me about that. I like it.
So growing up, my mother couldn't swim, and it was really important to her that we learned how to swim. And one of the things she would always say is that the best way to minimize your chances of drowning is to not learn to swim. Because people who don't swim don't get on boats, they don't go on swimming pools, and these are the places where people drown. But still, learning to swim is a valuable, great thing to do, because if we just always pick the safest option, we miss out on so many beautiful experiences, we miss out on so much meaning in life. And it's not saying that safety is not important. Like if you're riding a bike, you should wear a helmet, but walking is a lot safer than riding your bike. You shouldn't quit riding your bike and only walk places just because it's safer.
Right. And driving a car or being in a car is about the most dangerous thing you can do in society these days. So
Yeah, but we all still do it. And again, you can't quit doing it just because it's not safe. But it's
Mm.
about, keeping safety important. And I also like it because it's very contrarian to the safety first thing that everyone always says.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I've got to think about it. I might come back to you and have a private, deeper conversation about that because I like a lot where you're going at it with that one. And it gets into this theme of exploration and the importance of doing unnatural things to expand your horizons, to expand your bands. A lot that I'm thinking about now, quite a bit. Thanks for sharing that. Louis, I don't know where you are on my screen here.
Right here. Let's see if
There
I
we
can
go.
on my daughter screaming.
Uh,
Yeah, so like mine is like I don't watch the news. And so kind of when I was growing up, like when I was younger, like my grandparents, they always had the news on like at 6 p.m., the local news. And then my
Yeah.
parents, same thing. Like my mom watched the news in the morning when she would get ready for work. And as I got older, like in my later teens and my 20s, like I realized like none of the stuff, most of the stuff on there didn't really affect me. It kind of just made me either like worry about stuff that didn't really, like I said, pertain to me. And so I found that if something is super important and does pertain to me, then like one of my friends will tell me about it, or somebody that I know personally, it'll get back to me somehow if it's important enough, if that kind of makes sense. So it's almost kind of like a filter
mm.
that I've made for myself.
Yeah, you're talking about curating your own information sources.
Yeah. And
There's
so nowadays, like with social media, like I don't follow like other like influencers or famous people or anything like that because it doesn't really, like I said, pertain to me. And so if something's like trending or again, it'll get back to me somehow. Either somebody will send it to me or something.
Mm. There's a very callous quote by Mark Zuckerberg when the algorithm or when the feed in Facebook turned into an algorithm based feed and not just a time based feed. One of the things that he said is a squirrel dying in your front yard is probably more relevant to your interests right now than people dying in Africa.
Yeah,
And it's so callous. And it feels so bad and wrong to say it, even though it's not my words. But it is very true, isn't it?
for sure.
And a lot of the news that we get are things that aren't actually more important when we really think about it. It's just what is the news station with misaligned incentives to engage us longer so that we watch longer so that it pays for more advertisements for them. They're going to dig into they're going to dig into the stuff that's more present to us. They're going to talk about the squirrel dying in our front yard versus the much more important issues that are going out. And so what I wrote down as you were saying that, Lyria, is just the importance of curating your own news, not letting the algorithm feed you with whatever it wants to feed you, but actually going out and curating your own news, which is something I need to get better at. But I like that. Brianna, tell me about this one. I like this.
So when I feel like I've failed, I get excited because I'm like, okay, I tried this, it didn't quite work. And either somewhere along the way the steps didn't work, or this wasn't the right time, or I need to go a different direction. And for me, it's not like, I might get a little bummed out temporarily, but for me, it's exciting because it's almost like a puzzle piece. It's like, okay, this didn't fit, so what's gonna fit? And finding a new way. So for me, it's kind of like this exciting redirection of, okay, now I'm gonna try something new because this isn't the way. So instead of being bummed out, like, oh, I failed, I did something wrong, I'm like, okay, I'm excited to try something new.
Yeah. One of my favorite analogies in the Obvious Choice book is failure is like a bee sting. Before you ever get stung, you're really scared because everybody tells you how much it hurts. but then you get stung and it sucks and it hurts. But then it goes away and it's fine and you're not so scared about getting stung the next time. And I found failure is very much like that. You're so scared of it before it happens. But then it happens and you're like, yeah, that sucked. And I wish it didn't happen. But like, I'm fine. The world didn't end. And then you're not so scared the next time. And it's actually a very freeing feeling. And every
Right, just the
time
fact that you tried.
the fact that you tried and it worked out, you know, probably in a way that you never would have anticipated if you never tried. But you learned some stuff. And then, I mean, God, how many times have I failed? I mean, anybody who's ever done anything meaningful or had any kind of hits has had way more losses than hits. It's like, what's the Michael Jordan lines? Like, I've missed whatever, how many more shots, or the Wayne Gretzky thing, I've missed 98% of the shots I've taken or whatever. It's like, I've written 11 books, put on 5 conferences, built, I think it was 8 digital programs. And like the vast majority of any success I've ever had has been the result of one book and one program. Like, that's just the way it goes. You know, you got to do all that stuff. It's so hard to manufacture it. The odds that it's going to happen the first thing you do is pretty slim. But you really only need for something to work once to make a pretty meaningful difference in your life. So thank you for sharing that. This one goes back to the conversation we are having before, which is just say the nice thing you're thinking. I mean, this is probably the single one that I remind myself of on any given day over and over and over again, is just say the nice thing you're thinking. If I'm thinking something nice to somebody, just say it. I was at Legoland and Calvin was, we're both the same in that we like to be around people and then we need to just basically shake in a corner for a while and not be around people. And so Legoland was very intense. And so Calvin was watching like one of the Lego movies and I was just outside. I had a drink, I think it was like a gin and tonic, and I was just outside, just kind of catching my breath. And there was one other family sitting outside, and I don't know what it was. It was like the husband and wife didn't quite match. Like they looked very different. And these kids were just beautiful kids, and they were there in Legoland, like having this great time. They were eating a pizza or something. It was just something very beautiful about the scene, about what was going on. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I wanted to tell like the mother or the father, it's like, oh, you have a beautiful family. And everything in my head was like, oh, what are they going to think? Like the guy was kind of like a rough looking guy. Right. And I was like, oh, what are they going to think? Are they going to think that I'm like a creep? I'm here by myself. I'm giving myself all of these reasons why I shouldn't say the nice thing that I'm thinking. Right. And then I reminded myself, no. That's the rule. Say the nice thing you're thinking. So I said to them, I was like, you guys have such a beautiful family. And we had like, just for a couple minutes, just a really, really nice conversation about where they're from, about their kids. And it's amazing to me how much our minds seem to default to fear if we don't grab it and pull out. So say the nice thing you're thinking. Simple, but just a really, really easy rule to remind myself at. Another default, I like defaulting rules. Default to generosity. Knee jerk. If somebody on the street is asking for money, or if somebody's raising money, or if I feel like getting a gift for somebody or whatever it is, and it's not their birthday, it doesn't matter. It's just this idea of default to generosity. I have never regretted once giving a gift to somebody for anything. But again, it's the same thing. I always second guess myself with it. So if you can afford it, of course, but default to generosity. The same thing as defaulting to trust. Like you're just never going to regret it. And also like reciprocity is a real thing too. You'll probably get it back in many ways. And if you give to somebody, particularly somebody who might be down and out, somebody on the street, yeah, they might take that money and buy cigarettes or buy alcohol, whatever it is. But you know what? Maybe they're hungry and cigarettes are the way to quell their appetite. Maybe they're cold and alcohol is the way to keep themselves warm. Like you don't know the full story. And it's not your place to. So that's a useful one for me. Oh, this one's fun. This is one that we just recently started instituting, but we call it, Allison and I call it buy 2 extra tickets. So now whenever Allison and I are going to see any show, any sporting event, anything that we decide to do, we just buy 2 extra tickets. And then we just find somebody else to come with us. And it's just like, I'm going to see Green Day in like a month. Just bought 2 extra tickets. We got a Movish theater pass, which is like the whatever, the big theater company here where all the Broadway shows come through Toronto and stuff. We just bought 4 seasons passes instead of 2. And you can fly in for Green Day. It's in August. But it's just really fun. It's just like, especially because these things have a specific date. And I hate with every ounce of my being that whole like, oh, do you guys want to go for dinner? Or do you guys want to go see a show? Oh, sure. When are you free? When are you free? Oh, when are you free? Oh, I don't know. I'll have to check my calendar. I hate that shit so much. We are going to see Green Day. It is on August 2nd. I would love for you to join us. Can you make it? If not, I will invite somebody else. That's it. And we did the same thing. We saw Dave Chappelle. Yeah, buy 2 extra tickets. You can always find somebody to go with instead of planning in advance to go with people. It's just a really nice excuse to get together with friends or family members or something like that. And enjoy time with them. Because life gets busy as an adult, for sure. Weekly date night, I don't know. It's a common one. You hear that all the time, but like weekly date night, if you can swing it, man. We don't do anything big. Like Allison and I will go rock climbing or we'll take our paddleboard out to the river. Sometimes even just go for a walk around the neighborhood. But like just having that time for us makes a world of difference if you can swing it. What's easier to swing, similar to buy 2 extra tickets, is weekly dinner with neighbors. We just started this summer and it's been amazing. Every week, we try, and we've done it successfully so far, to have at least one other family, sometimes it's a couple if they don't have kids, or family with kids, over for dinner, or we go over to their place if we get invited. Because the people you live close to in your neighborhood are the people you're going to see most often. Like your neighbors, your local community, at least for me, I think have as big, if not bigger, an impact on my daily well-being than anybody else in my life. Building strong community locally is really important. And so we see these people all the time. Like we had our neighbors across the street over last night with their 2 kids. We see them all the time. We're often in each other's houses because the kids are playing. But to say to them, hey, let's actually have dinner together. So and then of course they start inviting you too. But yeah, taking the initiative for stuff like that has made a big difference. I'll fly through the rest of them. The rest of them are really quick. 15 minutes focus time with each kid every day. This is a friend of mine's father who was a pastor gave me this advice many, many years ago before I had kids. He said, the best thing that I ever did, and the advice I give to all my kids who have children, is every single day, take 15 minutes on the floor, one-on-one with each kid. Build Lego, read books, talk to them, whatever you want to do. But not together, not as a pair, like one-on-one. I can't say that I'm perfect, that I do this every time, but try to. Read the book before watching the movie. I don't know. It's a pretty obvious one. The book's always better than the movie. Lord of the Rings, maybe the movie was better than the book, but just about every other. I don't need to listen to somebody explain the blades of grass for 3 pages. But yeah, read the book before watching the movie. Oh, strike the iron when it's hot. There's 2 more. One is strike the iron when it's hot. So this is something that my dad taught me. Strike the iron when it's hot basically means that when there's an opportunity, like jump on it. On Wednesday last week, I heard back from somebody that I wanted to meet with that he was available to meet in New York City at 5 p.m. for 30 minutes on Broadway. And so that was at noon on Wednesday. By 2 p.m., I had booked a flight to New York City at 11 a.m. on Thursday morning. And I flew to New York. I booked 3 different meetings with people that day, because if you say you're in New York for 6 hours, do you want to get together? People are like, yeah, I'll make the time. And so I booked 3 other meetings that day. I met up with them at 5 p.m., about 5:15 to 6. And then I walked out of the jazz cafe or whatever it was that we met in on Broadway. I hailed a cab and I took it to the airport and flew home. I don't know what will come of that, but I almost didn't, when he told me that he was available the next day in New York, I almost didn't book the flight. And then I reminded myself of that rule. When there's an opportunity that you've been wanting to happen for a long time, you drop everything, you do whatever you need to do, even if it's as ridiculous as flying to New York for 8 hours. And you strike the iron when it's hot. And I've never regretted doing that when I do it, even if I'm tired. I think I'll end it there. There's one more, but I haven't quite figured out a way to put it in words yet. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think of the idea of having the rules? I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to talk about last week, and then I remembered that I'd finally written all these out, and I thought it'd be fun to share them. Different
I
kind of
think this
topic.
was super awesome, and I think that I use a lot of these without thinking about it.
Okay.
And just having them down and written out as like a reminder is like a really cool framework to have. So I appreciated this a lot.
Thank you, Julian. Yeah, thank you. Some of them particularly more than others, like the idea of like default trust, the idea of it's not a fire if you don't know about it. The say the nice thing that you're thinking. It's just so simple, right? But I need to be reminded over and over again. Well, thank you so much for hanging out, for spending this time with me. As always, really appreciate you all. And, you know, we're in the group, in your corner. Happy to help. Anything you need, just reach out. Talk soon.